Hey, good day, everybody. Welcome back to Rocky Mountain Readings, where last week we broke into the wonderful book Noahides, The Road Toward a Meaningful Life, 38 Spiritual Lessons for a Purposeful and Religious Life by Embracing the Seven Laws of Noah by Dr. Amnon Hever. And we turned a corner on the last day, day 3, where we broke into the Chabad explanation, and it's really getting good. So, but for those of you who are not familiar with Dr. Amnon Hever, Dr. Hever was born in Israel and has spent his adult life involved in education in Israel and abroad. He's the recipient of the Jerusalem Prize for Jewish Education. Dr. Hever served as the chair of the Department of History at Orat Israel College, and he headed the Israeli branch of the University of Alabama at Birmingham master's program in school counseling and educational leadership. He was also the director of the new Sanhedrin, where he was ordained and granted the title of rabbi. And I've had a joy just to meet Dr. Hever and have chats. It's exciting. So on that note, we may as well just keep diving in. And I really expect to finish this book by Wednesday this week. So yeah, let's just jump right into it. We're now at the Chabad section and chapter 3, Law 3, Respect for Human Life, Do Not Murder. This principle teaches that human life is sacred. One must never do anything that would result in the death of a fellow human being. One must not derive any profit from the death of an innocent human being. This principle also considers abortion as well as euthanasia to be equivalent to murder. It is permissible to kill a murderer. That's a very, very, very big point to keep in mind when dealing with the Rodef. If a person is, lots to understand about that, right? It is also permissible to kill in self-defense. One may also kill if it is absolutely necessary to save an innocent person's life. This principle forbids suicide. You may not do anything that may endanger your own life. You must not do anything that endangers the lives of others. If you have a business, you must make sure that it does not endanger the safety of others. God is holy. Life is holy. The Torah is primarily concerned with life on this world. The soul exists before its descent to earth and returns to the heavenly realm in the afterlife. It is a descent for the purpose of ascent. The ascent being the fulfillment of the ultimate purpose in creation, the creation of a dwelling for God in this world. King Solomon describes the soul as the candle of God. For what purpose does God need a candle? Is there any place where it is dark before him? The candle is needed for this world within which God has clothed his majesty. The soul illuminates the body and the world, enabling it to recognize the Creator through the fulfillment of the Torah and the mitzvah in daily life. A specific purpose. In addition, every soul has a specific purpose besides the general purpose of making a dwelling place for God in this world. The Baal Shem Tov said that a soul, in addition to keeping the Torah and mitzvot, may descend to this world and live for 70 or 80 years just to do a favor for another in the physical or in the spiritual realms. How does one know one's own specific purpose? This is a question we often get. How does one know which favor is the purpose of one's soul descent? The answer is that everything happens by divine providence, and if a person is presented with a certain opportunity, this is certainly sent from above, and should be treated as if it is the purpose of one's soul descent. Our Torah stated, everything is from the hands of heaven except the fear of heaven. This means that whatever happens to a person is from heaven, the particular time and place a person lives, and his station in life. Whether rich or poor, etc., is decided from heaven. A person's only contribution is the fear of heaven, his reaction in any given situation. We are all presented with unique opportunities and challenges, and it is our task in life to utilize them for the divine purpose. The soul's descent. Our sages stated further the essential nature of the soul, its holiness and purity, and how it is completely divorced from anything material and physical. The soul itself, by its very nature, is not subject to any material desires or temptations, which arise only from the physical body and the animal soul. Nevertheless, it was the Creator's will that the soul, which is in the image of the divine, should descend into the coarse physical world and be confined within and united with a physical body for scores of years in a state which is diametrically opposed to its spiritual nature. All this is for the purpose of a divine mission, which the soul has to perform to purify and elevate the physical body and its related physical environment, making this world an abode for the divine presence. This can be done only through a life of Torah and mitzvahs. When the soul fulfills this mission, all the transient pain and suffering connected with the soul's descent and life on this earth is not only justified, but infinitely outweighed by the great reward and everlasting bliss which the soul enjoys thereafter. Makes clear sense. The wasted opportunity. From the above, one can easily appreciate the extent of the tragedy of disregarding the soul's mission on earth. For in doing so, one causes the soul to descend to this world virtually in vain. For one has not achieved one's purpose. Even where there are brief moments of religious activity in the study of Torah and the practice of the commandments, it is sad to contemplate how often such activity is tainted by a lack of real enthusiasm and inner joy, without recognition that these are the activities which justify existence. Apart from missing the vital point through failure to take advantage of the opportunity to fulfill God's will, thus forfeiting the eternal benefits to be derived from this, example, the physical existence. It is contrary to sound reason to choose that aspect of life which accentuates the enslavement and degradation of the soul, while rejecting the good that is within it, namely, the great elevation that is to come from the soul's descent. The proper thing to do is to make the most of the soul's sojourn on earth, and a life which is permeated by the Torah and mitzvot makes this possible. It is also abundantly clear that since God, who is the essence of goodness, compels the soul to descend from its sublime heights to the lowest depths for the purpose of the study of Torah and the fulfillment of the mitzvot, it must mean that the value of Torah and mitzvot is very great. Furthermore, the descent of the soul for the purpose of being elevated shows that there is no other way to obtain this objective except through the soul's descent to live on this earth. If there were an easier way, God would not compel the soul to descend to this netherworld. For only here, in what the Kabbalists call the lowest world, can the soul attain its highest ascent, higher even than the angels, and, as our sages say, the righteous are superior to the foremost angels. Serve God with joy. Reflecting on the greatness of the Torah and mitzvah, specifically pertaining to this life, reflecting also that the Torah and mitzvah are only means to attain the soul's perfection and the fulfillment of the divine purpose, one will experience a sense of real joy at one's fate and destiny, despite the many difficulties and handicaps from within and without, which are inevitable on this earth. It's the nature of this plane. Only in this way can one live up to the injunction, serve God with joy, which the Baal Shem Tov made one of the foundations of his teachings, which is expounded at length in Chabad teaching and pointed out by Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Ladi in his monumental work Tanya, chapter 26, verse 31. Ultimately, following such a path in life will lead to true happiness. Happiness, in the Jewish sense, may be defined as follows. When a person is doing what God wants from him at any given moment, then he may be truly happy. Therefore, if at any given moment and situation a person acts according to the directives of the Torah instruction, he is truly happy and a blessed person. This feeling transcends all worldly matters, for such a person understands that everything that happens in life is orchestrated by God. The double standard. Double standards are supposedly unethical. However, Judaism, the ethos contained in the Bible and expounded by the sages of Israel, abounds with double standards. In fact, these double standards are at the heart of how we live and what we have taught the world, and at the heart of what makes an ethical person. Think about this. One example is the different ways in which we regard tragedy. Depending on who is the victim, when something bad happens to myself, the Torah tells me to trust in God's help, accept and justify his ways, and examine my ways for what I might have done wrong so that I might learn a lesson from what occurred, which are precisely the things I'm not supposed to do regarding someone else's troubles. Yeah, know your bounds. Stay in your lane. Another example of a double standard relates to the difference in how we evaluate ourselves and how we evaluate others. Briefly stated, we're supposed to judge ourselves by what we've actually achieved and judge others by what they're capable of achieving or their potential. Is your blood redder? But perhaps the most fascinating and important double standard in Judaism is in the way we apply the divine commandment, do not kill. The Talmud tells the story of a man who was threatened by the hoodlum that ran his city, that he'll be killed unless he kills a certain person. The great Torah sage Rava told this man, "What makes you think that your blood is redder than that person's blood?" Much has been written on the infinite value that the Torah places on every individual life. After the concept of monotheism, from which it derived, this is the most revolutionary idea which the Jew has introduced to mankind. Revolutionary in the sense that it flies in the face of everything everyone previously believed, as indeed in the face of common sense. And revolutionary in the way it has transformed the face of civilized society. Placing an infinite value on every human life means an utter rejection of any scale by which to qualify the worth of a human life. A retarded baby's life has the same value as that of the wisest person on earth. An 80-year-old vegetable cannot be sacrificed to save the life of a 20-year-old genius. Torah law goes so far as to rule that the entire city cannot be saved by giving up a single individual for death, because each and every life is divine. Hang on, my phone's just banging away here, folks. Because each and every life is of divine and therefore infinite significance. 10,000 infinites aren't any more than one infinity. An example, euthanasia, abortion of deformed babies are forbidden because life is a gift by God, and in spite the fact that we may not see it in a revealed manner. In light of the above, it is surprising to find the following law in the Torah, derived from Deuteronomy 22:26. If someone is coming to kill you, rise against him and kill him first. This law applies equally to someone coming to kill someone else. You are obligated to kill the murderer in order to save his intended victim. This law seems to contradict the principle of life's infinite value. If no life can be deemed less valuable than any other, what makes the victim's life more valuable than the murderer's life? Furthermore, this rule applies to anyone who is coming to kill you. He hasn't even done anything yet. Maybe he won't succeed. Maybe he'll change his mind. Nor does the law say anything about trying to run away. It says if someone is coming to kill you, rise against him and kill him first. The same Torah that tells us that God placed a spark of himself in every human being, thereby bestowing upon his or her physical existence a godly, infinite worth. That same Torah also tells us that God has granted free choice to every person, including the choice and the power to corrupt his or her God-given vitality and turn it against itself, using it to destroy a life. A person can choose to turn himself into a murderer, someone who is prepared to destroy life in order to achieve his aims, in which case he is no longer a life but an anti-life. To kill an anti-life is not a life-destroying act, it is a life-preserving act. It is not a violation of the commandment, do not kill, but its affirmation without the law. If someone is coming to kill you, rise against him and kill him first. The principle of life's infinite value is nothing more than an empty slogan, a mere idea. Judaism is not an idea, it is a way of life. God's ideas made real. Here are some points to ponder. What is our mission in this world? Why is abortion forbidden? Why is suicide forbidden? Can we take a life when someone asks? Euthanasia. When must we kill a person? Number 4, Law 4, respect for the family. Do not commit adultery. The Torah acknowledges that a good sexual relationship between a husband and wife strengthens their marriage and love. It is accepted that a husband and wife should love each other and that their love should be passionate. The purpose of sex in a marriage is to perpetuate the human race and to create a close and permanent bond between the spouses, and it is the marriage's foundation. It is a fundamental human need to experience love through physical closeness with a permanent mate in a secure long-term relationship between spouses. The Torah forbids having sexual acts with a married person, committing homosexual, incest, or bestiality acts, since they are a sin. God blessed Noah and his children, and he said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth," in Genesis 9:1. Forgive me. What is marriage? The Torah teaches us that marriage is not merely a union between two totally independent individuals. Marriage is the reunion between two halves of the same unit. A couple shares the same soul, which upon birth divides itself into two incomplete halves. Upon marriage, they reunite and become once again complete. What we are dealing with here is not only a union on the physical, emotional, and or intellectual level. What we are dealing with here is a union on the deepest, most essential level of self. There are souls that are compatible for marriage, and there are souls that are not. Besides the case of mixed marriages, the Bible enumerates a list of invalid marriages, for example, the marriage between a biological brother and sister, or between a man and a woman that is married to another man. In other words, incest or adultery. The Bible is not only talking here about prohibitions, but facts. In the aforementioned examples, there can never be any spiritual marriage, even though it might physically be possible to cohabitate and procreate for such individuals. What is wrong with intermarriage? We live today in a multicultural and multi-religious society. We mix freely with and respect people of all faiths. Many Jews today grow up fully assimilated and comfortable in a secular society and environment. Why is it such a tragedy if a Jewish man finds a non-Jewish woman, or vice versa, with whom he feels totally compatible and decides to marry her? He claims that she is a genuine lovely person with a fine character, often much nicer than any Jewish woman he has met. She is at home with his Jewish background and culture, and they both share the same values, hobbies, and pursuits. A perfect match, yet not made in heaven? Why not? The decision to marry out is perhaps the most telling moment when a person must consider what the Torah or Bible actually states. There is a difference between a Jew and a non-Jew in that each one has a different mission from God. Get that clear. And now, at the time of marriage, a divine institution in the godly tradition, a person wishes to change what the Creator set out in the Torah. We need to accept the divine law, which assigns to each and every one of us a unique task, to the non-Jew and Jew alike, in making this world a dwelling place where the light of God shines, as it states, and God will be king on all nations of the world. One task is not better than the other, and both are vital and important and complement one another. Based on the above, we have a very simple explanation for the Jewish friend as to why we cannot consider him or her as potential marriage partners. It is simply due to the biblical concept of marriage. We should respect everyone's unique quality and personalities, however, not as husband and wife. Is conversion an option for the non-Jewish? These are important questions Noahides ask. Conversion into Judaism is serious business. Ask yourself this question: is the conversion being carried out from a true desire to become Jewish, independent of any impeding partnership? Or is it a token conversion, done to please some parent or other relative? A serious conversion can take years and involves serious change in lifestyle and conduct. To undergo a cosmetic or plastic conversion is obviously not an acceptable solution to a serious-minded person, and even more abhorrent to an honest person. A true conversion has to be such as to transform a non-Jew into a Jew, with a new Jewish neshama, soul like a newborn child of Jewish parents. Think about that. Such a conversion is one that carries out in strict accordance with halakha, Jewish law. Anything less is only a sham and a mockery. Don't want that. The halakha, Jewish law, is very clear in its insistence that the would-be convert honestly and wholeheartedly accepts all the mitzvot commandments without exception. Accepting all but one mitzvah automatically invalidates the conversion, and the non-Jew remains a non-Jew exactly as before. Of course, it is possible to mislead a rabbi or a rabbinical court by declaring one's readiness to accept all the mitzvah without really intending to. But one cannot mislead the Creator, who is the one who imbues the convert to Judaism with the neshama or soul, new soul. There is a well-known popular argument that it is unfair to demand more of a would-be convert in terms of adherence to the mitzvah than that which would many born Jews observe in practice. This contention is inadmissible, since the complete commitment to halakha is a requirement and stipulation of Jewish law, to which the would-be convert must unequivocally commit himself. A word of caution: within a Jewish community today, one may convert in either an Orthodox or progressive establishment. It should be clear from the start that an Orthodox conversion is accepted in all Jewish circles, whereas the Orthodox do not accept a progressive conversion. To convert in a progressive establishment is hazardous in itself, for one's Jewish identity is then not universally recognized. The Noahide laws are a way that all non-Jewish people to fulfill their divine mission and receive reward in the world to come, just like any Jew that keeps the 613 commandments. We all are created by God in His image. We all do not look or think the same. Every human being that keeps Torah laws will have a share in the world to come. Here is some points to ponder. What is marriage? Why is same-sex forbidden? Why is marriage between Jews and non-Jews not an option? Why is conversion for the sake of marriage not an option? Purpose of sexual relationship in marriage. These are big questions, very important questions. Chapter 5, respect for the rights and property of others. Do not steal. Honesty is called the principle of dominion. This teaches that God grants property to each person. The person has control over the property that he holds for God. To steal the property of another is a perversion of this principle. That is why it is also called the principle of honesty. This principle teaches you that you must never steal anything from another. You must never deceive another person or take anything dishonestly. Everything is God's. Hasidism liked to tell the story about a certain individual who was flippant with his financial obligations. It reached the point that his debtors felt they had no recourse but to inform their Rebbe of the situation. The Hasidic sage summoned the man and asked him, "Is it true what they tell me, that you borrow money and don't repay, that you buy on credit, then evade payment?" "But Rebbe," exclaimed the Hasid, "haven't you taught us that the world is nothing, material cares are nothing, and money is nothing? Why are they making a fuss about a few rubles? It's all nothing." "In that case," said the Rebbe, "how about if we take this nothing," and here the Rebbe pointed to the body of the spiritual fellow, "and we stretch it out upon this nothing," the table, "and with this nothing, his belt, administer a dozen lashes to the first nothing." Behind this humorous story lies serious questions. If, as the psalmist proclaims, the world and all it contains is Hashem's, is there in fact such a thing as theft? Can something that does not in truth belong to you be taken from you? Of course, God said, "You shall not steal." Those are the rules of the game. But maybe that's what it is. It's the way the thieves justify in their own mind. God is saying, let's make believe that this house belongs to Tom, and let's make believe that this car belongs to Harry. Now, Harry, you mustn't burn down Tom's house, and Tom, you're not allowed to use Harry's car without his permission. Is that what it amounts to? According to the Torah of the Ten Commandments, the third commandment, "You shall not take God's name in vain," and the eighth commandment, "You shall not steal," are one and the same. Indeed, the Torah in Leviticus 5:20 refers to financial fraud as a betrayal of God. Because, explains the great Talmudic sage Rabbi Akiva, in defrauding his fellow, he is defrauding the third party to their dealings. On the face of it, this can be understood along the lines of our rules of the game thesis. The problem with stealing is not that a certain person's ownership has been violated, since everything belongs to God anyway, but that the divine command, "You shall not steal," has been transgressed. However, if that were the case, asks the Lubavitcher Rebbe, why does Rabbi Akiva describe God as the third party to their dealings? Isn't he the only party? Aren't we saying that it's God's car that's been stolen, and the fact that he chose to register it in Harry's name is basically irrelevant? But Rabbi Akiva is being consistent. Remember the verse, "The world and all it contains is God's." Rabbi Akiva, quoting this verse in the Talmud, interprets it to be saying he acquired and bequeathed the rules of this world. What does this mean? What does it mean? It's God's world because he created it. And if he bequeathed it, then it's not his anymore. What Rabbi Akiva is saying, explains the Rebbe, is this. Obviously, it's his because he created it, but then he desired to make it his in a deeper and more meaningful way by bequeathing it to a man. To own a world because you made it is basically meaningless. In human terms, that's like dreaming up a life and trying to derive satisfaction from your own fantasy. For something to be real for us, it has to have existence outside of ourselves. To derive pleasure from something, we have to share its existence with others. God desired to derive pleasure from this world. That's why he gave it to us and asked us to share it with him. That's why he said, "Tom, this is your house. I mean it. It is really and truly yours. Now this is what I would like you to do with it. I want you to put a charity box in your kitchen. I want it to be a place that shelters a moral family life. a place in which hospitality is extended to the needy, a place where my Torah, the Bible, is studied. Of course, I could just put you in this house and tell you to do all this without really giving it to you. But then you'd be doing all these things mechanically like a robot. Deep down, you would sense that it's not really your home, that the things you're doing are not really your achievement, and then it wouldn't ever be truly my home either. It would just be something I made up. That's why I gave it to you. You see it, sense it to be yours because it really is. You experience what you make of it to be your own achievement because it really is. And when you choose, with that free will that I granted you, to invite me into your home and make me at home in it, it will become truly mine also, in the manner that I desired it to be mine. And please don't steal Harry's car, because I have a stake in every financial transaction that occurs between the two of you. When you deprive Harry of the ownership that I have given him over his piece of my world, you are depriving me as well. You are making my ownership of my world all but meaningless. The first commentary. The Torah begins and Rashi asks a question about the first verse of the first chapter of the first book of the Torah. In the beginning, God created the heaven and earth. Rashi's question is, why does the Torah begin with a description of creation rather than with commandments, since the Torah is basically a book of commandments and a guide as to how we should behave in our daily life? The Torah should get right down to instructing us on our behavior, and yet it begins with a lengthy description of creation and the history of what happened from creation until the giving of the Torah. Rashi answers that this was done because there would come a time when the nations would accuse the Jews of being thieves and imperialists. They would say, "You stole the land from the nations," therefore the Torah begins with the story of creation. We will say, God created heaven and earth. Earth belongs to God. He gave the Holy Land to the Canaanites for a while, and then he took it from them and gave it to us. So our answer is that we can't steal the land because it belongs to God, and God gives it to whomever he wants. He wants the Holy Land of Israel to be under full ownership and control of his people Israel, to live in it according to his Torah, including treading the non-Jewish residents and visitors according to his code of behavior of kindness, fairness, and justice. The Holy Land of Israel. The Rebbe points out that this Rashi, which is basically a quote from the Talmud, doesn't say the land of Israel. It says we will be accused of stealing the land of Israel. It says that we will be accused of stealing the land of the nations. What is the land of the nations? The world belongs to the nations. The Jewish people are not of the world. They are of heaven. The Jews, strangers to the physical world, so they are trespassing on the land of the nations. Which land? Any land. Earth belongs to the nations of the world, which is why they're called the nations of the world. So God starts the Torah with the first commandment because the commandments are all related to the physical world, and the Jews who are heavenly nature would not understand how they belong to the physical world. God first had to explain to us by telling us that in the beginning he created the heaven and the earth. Heaven is not any more a place for God than is earth. The heavens also were created by God. Therefore, the part of God, which is the soul, doesn't belong in heaven any more than it belongs on earth. Huge point. The reason for the existence of heaven is that it was a stepping stone towards the creation of the earth. The purpose of creation is to reveal a godliness that is not immediately evident in the physical world, to bring that which is otherwise ungodly to godliness. How is this to be done? By dealing honestly and engaging in physical, worldly activity, but from a godly perspective, that is, through the laws of Torah. In the era of the Gula, redemption, there won't be any more ignorance, hatred, jealousy, One example for how this can be achieved is that the hatred known as anti-Semitism for Jewish people will clear up when people learn and understand how all the nations of the world are partners with the Jewish people in bringing godliness and spirituality into this physical world. Here are some points to ponder. Why is stealing not permitted? The land of Israel was given by God to the Jewish people, and the Bible Torah begins in Genesis. Everything comes from God. The purpose of creation is that we elevate and make a dwelling place for God. The world is fundamentally good, and we should cherish and appreciate it. Problems start to begin when people want to point out evil. When they point out evil in another person, and they don't realize that they're just making enemies. Because everybody tends to justify themselves as being good, which is kind of delusional. All right, Law 6. Creating law and order. Establish laws and courts of justice. Since God is just, so must you be just. Justice is the foundation of civilization. When justice ceases to exist, civilization crumbles. When criminals are not punished, they gain power and take over, and one should therefore do everything in their power to see that criminals are punished. This is especially true of criminals who violate the Torah principles as well as the laws of the land. Also, one should not benefit from any crime or criminal action. For example, the first Jew, Abraham, distinguished himself from those he lived among by demanding, "Will the judge of all the earth then not do justice?" The idea that there is a judge and there is justice, reward and punishment, that is up to us to fulfill God's will. All this, Maimonides says, is the very basis of Torah and its commandments, and so is God's omnipotence. By exploring these two concepts and the resolution of our tradition has provided, we are exploring the very core of Judaism. Is the world necessary? The ancient Greeks thought so, and this perspective has persisted throughout philosophy to this day. The world is here because it must be here. Jews, however, disagree. You are the beginning and you are the end, and who can tell you what to do? Creation is a deliberate act. It happens only because He chose it should happen. Even after a world exists, it remains unnecessary. In short, Torah grants God free choice. This idea is difficult for the rational mind because it is impossible to create a model for it. True randomness and spontaneity is entirely out of the range of mathematics. Even today's chaos theories are based on procedural models. We can't create a system that will choose randomly with no explanation for why it is chosen either way. A system of effect without cause. Typical of human intuition. We imagine that since there is no mathematical model for something, God is not allowed to do it. Yeah, it's the difference between the way existence from consciousness. You can't explain consciousness with something within existence. Anyways, let's return to this idea that the cosmos enters into being simply out of God willing it so. Let's explore a simple question. Does God have to make a world? In other words, does the supposition that there is an infinite essential being who is capable of creating a world determine that therefore a world must come into being? Or as a philosopher would put it, today's concept of science, however, has brought us to think in larger terms, surrendering the idea that there are things that do not fit and do not have to fit in our neat little models, such as the essential reality. It is this surrender that has allowed us to come up with relativity and quantum mechanics. It also makes it easier for us to conceive of this idea of choice, which is so fundamental to Jewish thought. To be and not to be. God's omnipotence then allows him to choose to create a world or to not create a world. As the Lubavitcher Rebbe interprets the words of Maimonides, God has both the power of being and of not being. He chooses being, so a world exists. At the same time, he chooses not being, as we'll explain. Let's look at a small analogy that will serve as something of a handle to grasp a very abstract idea. All analogies we need are provided within the human psyche. For in the image of God, he created the human being. The balanced human adult is the closest model of the cosmic process we can get. One token quality of an adult human being is the ability to hold back. A child feels compelled to speak and to do whatever arises in his mind. For an eloquent demonstration, ask a child to help another child with homework. It's next to impossible for them to help without giving the answers away. True, many adults have the same problem, but a mature mind is able to provide just what is necessary and then stand by while the student explores and discovers all on his own. At times, the student may fail or go off on dead-end tangents. A true adult is able to sit and watch, perhaps even assist the student to explore false options, and provide only what is necessary to ensure an eventual successful resolution. Through silence, the adult communicates more than through overt instruction. Instruction provides information. Unspoken guidance provides the student with his or her own mind. A careful balance of the two is the mark of an excellent teacher. Yeah, we've read on this before. You can't over-instruct. Doesn't make a good teacher, and under-instructing doesn't either. The act of creation and all those things that occur instantaneously because he so wills it are somewhat analogous to overt instruction. He wants it, he says it, and it is. All this extends from his power of being. But there are also things that he wills, yet withholds. That doesn't mean he doesn't tell us about them. In some cases he may, in some not, at least not overtly. But he, so to speak, restrains his words from their fruition, allowing us to achieve that result. He lets us know that we should care for each other, but allows us to do the opposite and experience the consequences. He lets us know he wants a world where charity below is in concordance with charity from above, but he leaves the fulfillment of his desires up to us. In very many cases, he leaves it up to us to determine what it is that he wants, instructing us only that we must rely on those who are accepted sages of his Torah. In Torah, God provides us a taste of his power of not being, and provides us something of himself that his act of creation does not. More accurately, Torah contains a balance of the two powers of being and not being, revealing and withholding, instructing and allowing failure. And it is through this balance that we are able to touch the essence from whence all opposites extend, as well as our own essential selves. Once again, the ever-repeating epitaph of Torah, Havea Hu Ha'elohim, the God of revelation is the same God as the God of concealment, and therefore there is nothing else but he. This is also the meaning of the statement, the Torah preceded the world. Even after creation of a world according to the blueprint of Torah, the divine will contained in Torah remains beyond it. Our mission is to funnel that higher plane into our reality. We do that by exercising our own free choice, which is, in fact, a reflection of God's free choice, which we have just described. Whew, such deep stuff. I found even after day 3, I had to go back and read the Hasidic points. Reread it just to grab the depth, and I'll probably have to do the same with this. There's some great stuff in here. Here are some points to ponder. Why do we need laws? They are man-made. The Torah, Bible, is the first book of the law that's fair and timeless. Torah is divine and is the blueprint of creation. What is the concept of free choice? The Torah justice is concerted with absolute truth. One, the witness a crime cannot be a judge. All right, point 7. 1 second, folks. Just doing some checking on. All right, point 7. Law 7, respect for all creatures. Do not be cruel to animals. And this has to do with the limb of a living animal. The principle of kindness must be extended to every human being and every living creature. For example, the Jewish commandment that one must feed one's animal before one sits down to eat is directly related to this principle. It is permissible to eat meat, but first the animal must be slaughtered or killed in the manner least painful to the animal. When you show kindness to God's creatures, God will show kindness to you. The consumption of the limb of a living animal, an example of this law, eating a live lobster is forbidden, is associated with cruelty to animals. The universal spiritual code is known as the 7 Noahide laws. The reason for this name is because, although 6 of the laws were commanded to the first person, Adam, the 7 laws were completed with Noah. 2, when the 7th commandment was given, only after the flood, it was permitted to humanity to slaughter meat for consumption, and with this came the law prohibiting one to eat the limb of a living animal. If Judaism requires us to be kind to animals, shouldn't we be commanded to be vegetarians? I have the uttermost respect for anyone who chooses not to eat meat out of concern for animal welfare, and there have been some who have suggested that this is in keeping with Judaism's ideals, although all agree that Judaism allows eating meat. The problem comes when you demand it. Yeah. Creating a law. However, there is another way of looking at it, a more spiritual angle, which indicates that eating meat is not just an accommodation to human desire, but has a holy purpose. The Talmud teaches that the reason Adam and Eve were created after all other creatures was to teach them a dual lesson. Humans can be either the pinnacle of creation or its lowest life form. If they act appropriately, then everything was created just to serve them. But if they degrade themselves, then they should remember that even a flea preceded you. Free choice. The human being is the only creature with free choice. This means we can either work on ourselves and become better than our nature, or abuse our gifts and become worse. Only a human can be generous, kind, selfless, and act higher than his or her instincts, and only a human can be cruel, destructive, and murderous. Although sometimes animals do what seem like acts of kindness or destruction, they are invariably just following their instinct for survival. There is no altruism or malice in their actions. When we use our freedom to act in a kind, holy, and selfless way, we are the highest life form, and the rest of creation is there for us. Then, by eating other creatures, we are, in fact, elevating them to places where they couldn't go by themselves. Think about it. For example, if I eat a tomato and then expend the energy that tomato gave me in performing an act of kindness, the tomato has become a partner in my action, thus making the world a better place, something a tomato can't do on its own. On the other hand, if I use my energy only to further selfish goals or to oppress or inflict harm, then what right do I have to eat a tomato? The tomato never hurt anybody, and by eating it and causing harm, I am corrupting the innocent tomato. Do you see the ripple effect of action? This is why Judaism doesn't see eating animals as necessarily being cruel. In fact, it could even be cruel not to eat animals. Right, my Rabbi Chaim Goldberg pointed that out to me when he said, if you don't milk the cow gets in great distress. They have to be milked because you are robbing them of a chance to serve a higher purpose, unless, of course, it's for health reasons. However, if you yourself are not living a life of purpose, then it is just as cruel to eat a tomato as a chicken, since you are debasing all of these life forms. Compassion, not understanding. The Talmud states Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi was a perfect tzaddik, righteous person. However, he suffered great pain. How did it begin? Through a deed of his. He was walking through the marketplace when a calf being led to the slaughter ran to him and hid under his cloak. He told the sheep, "Go, for this you were created." That is when his suffering began. And it ended through another deed. His maid was sweeping the floor and found the young of a weasel nested between the boards. She began to sweep them away when he stopped her. It is written, he said, that his compassion is upon all of his works. That is when his suffering ceased. We are meant to not understand, because not understanding is what allows us to have compassion. Think about it. Rabbi Israel Baal Shem Tov, 1698 to 1760, in the years that he was a hidden mystic, would make his livelihood slaughtering chickens and beef for Jewish communities before a festival. When he left this occupation, a new slaughterer took his place. One day, the Gentile helper of one of his Jewish villagers brought a chicken to the new slaughterer. As the new man began to sharpen his knife, the Gentile watched and began to laugh. "You wet your knife with water before you sharpen it," the Gentile exclaimed, "and then you just start to cut." How else?" the slaughterer asked. And how else, the slaughterer asked. Yisrolik, the Baal Shem Tov, would cry until he had tears enough to wet the knife. Then he would cry as he sharpened the knife. Only then would he cut, replied the Gentile. The Torah commands us not to cause unnecessary pain to any living being. No distinction is made whether that living being is a cow or a lizard or a fly. The Rabbi Shalom Dovber of Lubavitch once scolded his son, the Rebbe Rayetz, for tearing up a leaf of a tree, saying, "What makes you think that the eye of the leaf is lesser than your own eye?" Even when it is deemed necessary to consume the life of another, there are rules. An empty-minded person, the sages taught, has no right to eat meat. They also said to never eat meat out of hunger. First, satisfy the hunger with bread. A person who eats meat solely for his palate and for his stomach degrades both himself and the animal. In other words, don't be bestial when you're eating. However, if it is mindful eating for the sake of harnessing that animal's energy to do good, eating that lifts the animal into a new realm of being, eating to give at least as much to the animal as it gives to us. Then it becomes a way of connecting with the divine and elevating our universe. As for the angels and their part in the deal, once the temple was destroyed, the Talmud tells, the table of every man atones for him. Your table is an altar. The angels are invited. Eat with humility and with compassion and with mindfulness. Do your part in the divine cycle of life. That's huge. People just understood that. Here are some points to ponder. What is the relationship between food and a person's spiritual life? Being kind and feeding your animal before you eat, or one's children. Having empathy for others and caring after your environment. What is free choice? Very important stuff. Noahide laws. Maimonides, Rabbi Moshe, son of Maimon, from Spain, 1138 to 1204, the Rambam, tells us the source for the 7 Noahide laws that all mankind is required to uphold. In his classic work, Mishnah Torah, in the section devoted to the laws of kings, chapter 6, law 1, he writes, 6 precepts were commanded to Adam: the prohibition against worship of false gods, the prohibition against cursing God, the prohibition against murder, the prohibition against incest and adultery, the prohibition against theft, the command to establish laws in courts of justice. Even though we have received all of these commands as tradition from Moses, and furthermore, they are concepts which intellect itself tends to accept, it appears from the Torah's words that Adam was commanded concerning them. All right, so I appreciate that this book's going through these. The prohibition against eating flesh from a living animal was added for Noah, as Genesis 9:4 states, "Nevertheless, you may not eat the flesh with its life, which is its blood." Thus, there are 7 commandments. These matters remain the same throughout the world until Abraham, who disseminated the belief in one God to a world that was steeped in polytheism and idol worship. Based on the words of Maimonides, we learned that Adam received 6 commandments and Noah was given an additional one after the flood. There is no explicit mention of Adam's original 6 commandments in the Torah, explicitly, and they are known to us by oral tradition. The difficulty that Maimonides grapples with is the source of the 7 Noahide laws, in contrast to the 613 commandments that are the obligation of the Jewish people and stated explicitly in the Torah. Why didn't the Torah clearly state the 7 Noahide laws as well? The 7 Noahide laws as reflected in the Torah. Now, this is important stuff, and hopefully, I'll put a time mark on this. So I know where it is in the video. All right. 7 Noahide laws as reflected in the Torah. Although not commanded explicitly, the requirements of the 7 Noahide laws can clearly be deduced from a study of the book of Genesis. And we did the book of Genesis with Rabbi Goldberg for 4 years. Yeah, excellent material. The prohibition against murder is evident from the story of Cain, who killed Abel and was punished. The prohibition against worship of false gods, i.e. the requirement to believe in one God, can be deduced from the story of Melchizedek, who greeted Abraham with the words, "Blessed be Abram to the supreme God," Genesis 14:19. Melchizedek himself is described in the previous verse as a priest to the supreme God. The prohibition against incest and adultery is seen from the story of Lot and his daughters. It is also seen from the incident in which Abraham's wife Sarah is taken as a wife by Abimelech, king of Gerar, and Abimelech is punished by God for his adulterous intentions. The requirement to establish courts of law can be deduced from the case of Sodom and Gomorrah, in which Abraham attempts to save the city from destruction, and God asks, "Will the judge of the entire earth not perform justice?" Genesis 18:25. The result of this justice is the destruction of the cities. The prohibition against stealing is learned directly from a verse regarding the generation of the flood. Now the earth was corrupt before God, and the earth became full of robbery. Genesis 6:11. Yeah, they were pecuniary in nature. The prohibition against cursing God can be learned from the story of Nimrod and the generation of the dispersion, Genesis chapter 10, who attempted to conquer God and were punished. The prohibition against eating the flesh of a living animal is commanded to Noah and his descendants explicitly after the flood in Genesis 9:4. The question you might rightly ask is, how is it possible that the Torah does not explicitly state the Gentiles' obligations in this world? To this, Maimonides responds, we have received all of these commandments as a tradition from Moses, and furthermore, they are concepts which intellect itself tends to accept. This means that a thinking person can readily understand the need for these commandments, and the mind readily accepts their validity. Because they are so obvious, there is no reason to write them in Torah. Another possible explanation is that the Torah is intended exclusively for the Jewish people, and it does not record the obligations of Gentiles. What does a Gentile who upholds the 7 laws receive? He has a portion in the world to come. He is considered a righteous Gentile, as Maimonides states in Law of Kings 8:11. Anyone who accepts upon himself the fulfillment of these 7 commandments and is scrupulous in their observance is considered one of the pious among the Gentiles and will merit a share in the world to come. However, to this, Maimonides attached another condition. This applies only when he accepts them and fulfills them, because the Holy One, blessed be he, commanded them in the Torah and informed us through Moses, our teacher, that Noah's descendants were commanded to fulfill them previously. However, if he fulfills them out of intellectual conviction alone, he is not of the pious of the nations. He may be wise of the nations, or he says, nor of their wise men. What is the difference between a believer in God and a believer in science? There are those who demand that religion serve as a substitute for scientific knowledge, or if it's sometimes incomprehensibly referred to, supreme science. Calling it by this name indicates that a person's intention is not to serve the Creator. Instead, he expects divine revelation to be of service to him. And people don't realize often what they're imagining. This is the same contrast that was expressed by the Jewish sages when they said, the wicked stand over their gods, but the righteous God stands over them. One who wishes to stand over his God insists that his God must be the basis of his existence and effectively serve him. This is the person who demands that religion provide the same value as science and fill the values that his involvement in science provides. Yeah, they seek to use and not serve. They try to make religion a tool. And that's where the notion of witchcraft comes into play. The problem with this is that it views religion in the service of man as a means for fulfilling his needs. And as we know, God is not your contractor. Judaism, as the religion of the Torah and the commandments, as reflected in Jewish law, is essentially a presentation of what is expected of man, not information that has been provided for him. There is a cosmic contrast between a believer like the patriarch Abraham and a believer to whom God explains nature or history. One who approaches Torah to assess whether or not it provides the information he seeks makes it clear that his intentions is not to worship God, but that God should worship him and serve his needs by providing him with information. In other words, this person is approaching the Torah and the giver of the Torah not as belief for the sake of God, but as belief for the sake of man. Yeah, and so often I see this even in Noahide circles. People don't get this point. A true believer in the master of the universe and the 7 Noahide laws does not expect the Torah to teach him about the world, nature, man, and history. If he is interested in those topics, he will exert himself to explore these problems to the extent that science allows it. And he will not bother God with these issues. The believer expects just one thing: guidance in the proper service of God. He understands that everything the Torah said about the world and history was not said in order to provide man with information, as that would be a mundane goal and not a wholly consecrated goal. Instead, everything that was said in the Torah has an exclusively religious purpose. All the probing into questions like, did God create the world, border on mythology and anthropomorphisms of God. Yeah, that's the way certain minds, live in their own skin, and the way they want to view the world. One who grasps the depth of meaning behind the principle that God has no body and he is free from all the properties of matter, and there can be no physical comparison to him whatsoever. One of Maimonides' 13 Principles of Faith understands that there is no difference in meaning between our understanding of the verse, in the beginning God created, and the verse, and God descended on Mount Sinai. And God is not a function of the world. We do not ask the question about what Hashem deemed necessary to tell us in the Torah based on what we know about the science of the world. A person who believes in science experiences no conflict between science and religion, because he deems religion completely unnecessary. This is true for anyone whose definition of religion is anything other than God's word, deeper than the deepest abyss and higher than the highest heavens. One who includes historical, philosophical, or scientific meaning in his divine worship makes religion unnecessary. He finds ways to fulfill his values, goals, and philosophies, and his philosophical, scientific, and historical imperatives with no need for religion. You know what? And I know it's a little shorter today, but that's probably a good point to stop for today. My target is to aim to finish this by Wednesday, and I think we're pacing, based on the length of the book, I think I'm, pacing to have her done Wednesday. I'm trying to have a full show, make sure it's worth broadcasting. So, we'll stop right there for today, and we will be back tomorrow, continuing with this part, Introduction to the Chronology of Religions by Dr. Hever. So I look forward to that. It should be exciting. Hopefully you guys are enjoying this. Noahides, The Road Toward a Meaningful Life. I've thoroughly enjoyed that Hasidic explanation. I will have to reread that because I want to digest it. It's not just ingest. I want to be able to digest what was written there, and there's deep implications in small packaged words, and I always love to find concepts that put it together in a way that is clearer, in a way that is digestible, and I think there's still plenty there, so I will have to review that on my own, in my own personal studies, just to get out of it what I believe Hashem wants me to grasp on a greater level. And it's just always a joy to know that Hashem's got purpose for you, and I think we touched on that today as well. So hopefully you folks are enjoying this. Rocky Mountain Readings, it's a series I've done. I probably read several dozens of books. It's so time consuming. Most people don't realize that when I set up a broadcast on 4 different channels here, I'm behind the computer an hour and a half before the broadcast goes live, setting everything up and making sure everything goes smooth. But on that note, Dr. Hever is starting that channel 7 Noah after Pesach, so after Passover. So it's supposed to go live next week. I'm sure I'll be hearing from him later in this week, or once Passover ends, and so keep an eye out for some more information about that. But I will be back tomorrow continuing Noahides, The Road Toward a Meaningful Life by Dr. Amnon Hever. I did place links to the book on Amazon. I know some people have purchased it already. If you're interested, I think it's a useful resource tool, especially after reading that Hasidic section. Put together the 7 laws in such a clear and concise way. Gotta love the Hasids for the clarity they bring. Excellent, quoting the Baal Shem Tov and the Lubavitcher Rebbe, excellent material. So, yeah, on that note, we'll see you tomorrow, same time. Have a wonderful, wonderful day, everybody. Bye for now.